This is Trucker's Corner with Trucker Glen.
Hey everybody, it is Trucker Ray with Trucker Glen. Welcome to this episode of Trucker's Corner. Hey big guy, how are you today?
I'm great today. How are you, Ray?
I can't complain at all. This is going to be a very interesting show. The title, Hurry Up and Wait. And I think the title says it all.
One of my biggest pet peeves in trucking, not so much in the early days of trucking because you got paid for everything, but in today's modern trucking world, boy, oh boy, you don't get paid for anything but miles.
Yeah. Let me just pick your brain for a minute here. You were talking about back in the day. What actually did drivers get paid for when they were out there? Share that.
You got paid for downtime. If your truck broke down, you got paid for it. If you laid over, you got paid for it.
How much did you get paid, though?
Well, that's way back in, I think just after the wheel was invented, Ray, so I can't remember.
Okay.
It was decent. It wasn't what you were making if you were putting on the miles, but it was decent. So you got that. You got if you chained the truck up, you got paid for chain up, and it was a set amount of money. So if you took longer to chain up than what you should have, that's your problem. But you would get a certain amount for chaining up. And meal allowance, I think we got, in those days it was $17 a day for meals, which was more than adequate. You know, because
now it's $17 a meal.
A meal, yeah.
Now.
Yeah, but you could $17. I mean, you lost a little bit, but it wasn't worth. And you got that whether you ate or not. You didn't have to put in meal receipts. You got $17 for every day that you worked. So if your trip was, 2 days, it was $34.
Yeah.
It added up.
And back then, a burger and fries and a drink was $5, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Or less?
Yeah. I think $4.75.
Yeah.
Right?
Now it's like $22 for that.
I know. It's absolutely insane. Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
So in those days, you were really looked after. And now these weren't necessarily union companies that paid you this stuff either. I mean, a lot of private companies were just because they wanted to get the drivers, they just had to follow suit and pay all this stuff. But when you're sitting for 4 or 5 days for free, I mean, there's definitely something wrong with this equation. It just shouldn't be happening. And if you go and fight for it, it depends how good of a driver you are, how long you've been there. I'm quite sure that if a newbie went to the boss and said, well, you either pay me this or I'm not going to work for you, they'd write you out a check right then and there and say goodbye.
Yeah. So, so we wanted to discuss on this episode, the good, the bad, and the ugly about the industry regarding what we're not getting paid. Fortunately, when I get laid over at places, shippers, receivers, or we're just basically waiting for a load, fortunately, this company does cover the layover. A lot of companies don't. Or it's very, very little layover. When you look on an average, say if you are driving 700 miles a day on the interstates down in the U.S., which is very doable, and you're getting 50 cents a mile, that's $350 before the taxes come off per day. But the average company may not even give you anything, so you're losing out. Like, say you're late over 5 days, which I had happen before when I was with other companies.
Yeah.
5-6 days sitting down there and like, my gosh, this is insane. We're cleaning out the fridge, my freezer, whatever, and you're not making anything. And I don't care, like you were saying before, go ahead, pay us $100 a mile. It ain't going to make any difference if we're sitting. Right.
And usually the places you're being laid over at are you're at Broken Spoke, Saskatchewan, or something like that.
Is that a town?
Yeah, it is, Ray.
I've never heard of that. Broken Spokes?
Broken Spoke, Saskatchewan.
That's funny.
Yeah.
That reminds me of Truth or Consequences, New Mexico. That's a town. Like some people, that's not a town. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, go ahead, continue. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, and when I was trying to get information on this, there's only the great big companies in the U.S. that some pay $20 a day after 24 hours, and some will pay $75 a day if you've been there for 48 hours. But I think they're far and few between. And in Canada, when I looked up, what's the average layover pay that a driver will receive, a little window came up and said there is no recorded information on this.
Wow.
So in other words, if you as a Canadian driver are getting a layover, you're pretty fortunate, because when they say there's no stats on it, that means that basically nobody's paying it.
Yeah, and there's no requirement for that.
Yeah.
I mean, if you get hired on with a company, you might want to ask them, is there any layover? If I get held over?
Well, I had to laugh because they said, when you sign a contract, now, maybe in the U.S., this is from the U.S. information I was getting, when you sign a contract that you're going to hire on with this company, make sure you find out what your layover is. Well, I know that if you did that in Canada and you said, okay, this is what I want for my layover because this is the status quo, everybody gets it, they would say, oh, time to go. I'll see you later. It won't...
Yeah. Well, I would say a majority of the companies that I worked for, maybe the really big ones, paid a layover. Mm-hmm. Some others didn't. Or you had to fight for it.
Yeah.
You moved 10 feet today. Or, you went from the shipper to the truck stop, so you still got some miles.
Yeah.
Other companies will pay it for it. Obviously, I mean, isn't it a fact that a lot of the time, if you're at a shipper, or if you have a load under you, that layover gets charged usually to where you're picking your product up if they're holding you up. I
don't know. I don't know about that. That's
you hear that, but I don't know how accurate that is.
You and I talked about this on the weekend, and I said, there wouldn't be any wait time at your receivers and shippers if the company said, okay, you got 1 hour to load that truck, and after that you're going to pay, let's just say, $35 or $40 an hour or $50 an hour, and all the trucking companies were on the same page as this, so that they knew, well, we'll just call ABC Trucking then because they don't charge that. And I guarantee you that you wouldn't be waiting for very long to get loaded or unloaded. And, even if you're hauling produce and they say, okay, half of the load won't be in here till 9 o'clock at night, so they would schedule you for 9 o'clock at night then. And right now, I mean, you're at the mercy of how, especially hauling produce, you can sit there all day and half the night. And it's because you're waiting for sometimes not even a skid, sometimes just a few boxes. Yeah.
When we're picking up a consolidation load, the last load that I brought up, it was just that. Checked in at 4:30 in the afternoon. I got a phone call at 8:30. Got put in a door, sat there until 11:30 because they wait for the product to come in and then they put it out on skids and they build your skids more or less. Yep. And it's never in the warehouse because it's kind of a cross dock. So they put everything together, they put it on there and so you literally have sat there at least, that's being generous by saying 4:30 checked in. Sometimes they want you to check in. There's one place in California, you check in at noon and you're lucky to get out of there by midnight. And if there is any kind of retention or anything that we don't even know, the driver doesn't know if there is any. A lot of the time I've heard from other drivers that the company ends up with that, but the driver doesn't get anything. I don't know if that's true or not, but I've heard other drivers talk about that. But again, you're sitting there most of your day and you're not getting paid to sit there. You just aren't. Yeah. And it's really too bad that there wasn't some kind of legislation for not only U.S. but also Canada that when a driver is, you mentioned being there an hour. That would be nice in a perfect world, but I think probably better. A more realistic thing would be like 2 hours. Past 2 hours, you start getting an hourly wage for sitting there. How much quicker those shippers would move if they knew that was coming out of their pocket, right? You wouldn't see guys playing with their phones. You see it all the time. I went to this one place, Glenn, And there was 4 guys in this place, and they were all on their phones. They were like, do you know when the product's showing up? Oh, maybe later. And they're all on their phones. I'm thinking to myself, if I was the boss of this company and I seen that, every one of them would be fired. You shouldn't be playing with your phones. But anyway.
And it gets worse.
I digress.
It gets worse, towards the end of the season, especially when you're waiting for 1 or 2 boxes. You're not even waiting for a skid. And the kicker is, when are you going to be up in Vancouver?
Yeah, that's right. Can you get it there in 2 days?
So if I leave at 9 o'clock at night, I'll be there at 3 the next afternoon.
Yeah.
Well, the load's got to be up there by 10 o'clock. Well, you should have got me out earlier. Because they don't seem to get it. It's the same amount of hours, and it doesn't matter what time you leave. And not only that, yourself, when you've been sitting around, you can't really sleep because you don't know when they're going to call you into the door.
Well, the best time I find that they will call you into a door is when you start making yourself a warm meal. Like, as soon as you get the microwave going and you're baking a potato, ring, the phone rings. Never fail. So if you want to get into a door fast, find something to do like making yourself a warm meal. Never fails.
Baked potato's not bad. It's when you got soup on.
Yeah, that's right, because you can't move the truck.
No, you can't move the truck.
That's right.
That's why I always have a steady supply of chocolate bars and potato chips.
That's right. You know what? Actually, the last episode you talked about that. We had comments on that. They're like, "Way to go, Trucker Glen."
Yeah.
So I guess I'm not the only one that thinks that's a great, or you're not the only one that thinks that's a great idea.
Yeah.
But what do you think of that idea? Like, is that even plausible to have some kind of legislation that would affect the drivers in North America that after 2 hours you have to start paying the drivers for sitting there? How that would change things?
Well, it would change things, but I mean, you're always going to have your hiccups where you are going to be sitting, but your layover time will pay for that. I mean, nobody minds sitting if you're making some money, but if you're not making any money, it's very depressing, and especially for the new drivers starting out. Boy, they get hit. They think they're going to make this. It's like I said to you earlier this week. A trucking company can promise you $2.50 a mile, but if you're sitting for a week at a time, that drops right down to lower than what they're making right now. So, I don't know why these companies have got all these trucks sitting waiting to load when they can only move so much freight. So I don't know if they're getting them in there just to say, okay, let's make sure these trucks are here. So I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, but I do know that money speaks volumes, and if they've got 50 trucks sitting out in their parking lot and only 3 of them at a time are loading, it's going to cost them a lot of money. Yeah.
Well, I also heard... Sorry?
Go ahead.
No, I also heard, too, that some companies, bigger companies that we load for, that come up to Canada, we have to have a certain amount of trucks in the area or they won't even look at us, right? Yeah. So it's like, you're going to have 15 trucks down there? Yeah, okay, well, then we'll consider you. And then they also can just cancel the load whenever they feel like it. Now I'm sent to a truck stop to wait for the next load, and now the $100 or whatever it is for a layover that you're getting paid, that's coming out of the company's pocket. And I actually feel guilty about that. I do, because it's like, we just had a load, now it just got canceled by this big buyer, which is a Canadian buyer, I won't mention the name, and all of a sudden they decide to cancel it. Oh, we really don't need that. Now the company now has to pay the layover, and like I said, some people don't mind sitting around, they play on their phone, they do whatever, but I actually feel really guilty about collecting money that I know that's hurting the company because this load got canceled. So...
And also, you got to remember, if they cancel on your company, they now have to move you to another location.
Yeah.
You might have to put on 600 miles before you get to the your destination. So they're out that money by paying you for the empty miles.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It's a catch-22, isn't it?
Yes.
But one thing that I have found that helps the situation regarding the title, Hurry Up and Wait, how many times I was told when I worked for, well, we can mention the company name. They're not around anymore, but that's H&R. They used to be called Hit and Run Transport. But, they weren't a bad company. I didn't mind working there. There were some good people there in the office. But I remember the person, my dispatch would always say, they would send me to prime time out in Saumis. You're probably familiar with them. Maybe you're not. Yeah. It's near Oxnard. And they said, go check in. You got to check in at noon. And it would be like, I would show up there, and they're like, well, your stuff won't be here until 8 o'clock tonight. I'm like, what? Now I'm sitting around for 8 hours. I just busted my you-know-what to get here, just to find out now I got to sit. And now your clock is running. This is before we were able to use agricultural exemption, because H&R never used ag at all. Mm-hmm. So now we're going to okay, if I get loaded by midnight, I'm only going to be able to drive 2 miles and I'm out of hours. And you couldn't park on site overnight. So I phoned ahead of time. I started to learn this. Friends, if you're new to the industry and you're heading to a shipper, call ahead of time and just verify your pickup number, verify your appointment. Oh, your appointment is good, but your product won't be here till 8 o'clock, even though your dispatcher is telling you to show up at 4. Well, you may want to call them ahead of time to verify the load, make sure it's ready. Sometimes it gets canceled. I've had that. And the driver is the last to know. I don't know. Have you ever experienced that?
Yes, I have, Ray.
Okay, Glenn. Calm down. Calm down.
Yes. Oh, all right. Sorry. I was getting a little excited there.
I know. I could see that little bit of steam coming out of your ears.
Right. Yeah. No, it's like I said, it's all around. I'm sure it's just as frustrating for the
calm down.
Companies.
Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, it must be just really frustrating for the trucking companies as well, because they're kind of at a loss. They're kind of throwing their hands up, saying, "Well, it's beyond our control." And I've said for a long time that these shippers and receivers, boy, they're holding all the cards. Of course, if they cancel a load, you can't really charge them for showing up, because they'll just get somebody else to haul their loads.
Yeah.
So it's I would love to see something come into play where they had to pay for their fair share.
Yeah.
So
the fair share. I've heard that a lot lately.
Yes.
Got to pay their fair share.
Yes.
And you know what? When we are stuck in situations where we are getting the runaround from a lot of shippers and receivers, I think the biggest pet peeve I have is when you show up for an appointment. It's always best to show up an hour early, check in, whatever.
Right.
And there's a late fee if you show up late. But you're sitting in their bullpen waiting to get into a door 5 hours later, and you're still not in a door, but there's no compensation for you.
Right.
Where is the justice in that? And that happens constantly. And there's one more thing I wanted to bring up too, but what do you make of that?
Well, you pretty well said it all. I mean, it's the ball's in their court, and I mean, we have nothing, and the companies have nothing to say about it. And like I said, if they cause too many problems, they won't be hauling for that. And they might be good payers, but I guess their theory is we pay good money to have our product hauled. So if you got to wait for 3/4 of a day, well, too bad, so sad.
Yeah,
you get somebody else to haul it if you don't want to.
Yeah, and you also have to be on your best behavior, because I try to be. I mean, there's situations where I'm like, oh, you've just got to be kidding, what's going on here? I still look at the person I'm talking to and I'm like, it's really not their fault. It's just the industry. It's the way it is. Things get delayed. Except when you have 5 guys playing with phones and there's 16 drivers sitting in your yard waiting to get in, and they're all looking like they've all seen a ghost because they're tired. They've driven an entire day to get there just to sit there for 8 more hours, and some places don't even allow any overnight parking. So where are these guys going to go? So
it's very frustrating all the way around. I mean, like we said, and I don't think I think it's only going to get worse before it gets better. I don't.
Yeah.
This industry needs such an overhaul, and I mean, trucking is the heartbeat and the lifeblood of the nation.
Yeah.
And I don't know, the way that things are, things are going. There's a lot of companies going down because they can't afford to run that way.
Well, I also noticed too that you've got these companies that just buy a ridiculous amount of trucks and they head out there because they figure the more the better. And like you were mentioning earlier, you can only service so many trucks out there, and then the other guys are sitting around for 5 or 6 days waiting for a load. Mm-hmm. And yet someone's like, oh, I'm tired of this, I quit. And I've seen this. Then right away they fill that truck with another person. Like, what are you doing? Like, if you're not able to keep everybody busy, maybe it's time to downsize a little bit. Wouldn't it be more affordable for the company as well?
Yeah. Or if they get a really bad account, they'll send all the new drivers there because they don't know any better.
Yeah, there you go. Back in the day when you were driving, what was your opinion and experiences with lumpers?
Well, I thought it was a grand idea until I found out I had to pay for them. And I said, no, I'm not paying for somebody to unload the load.
Right.
And they said, well, you have to unload it yourself. I've closed the trailer doors 3 or 4 times and pulled away from the outfit because you couldn't go in there without the lumpers. And man, some of these guys are pretty sketchy too. You know, so I don't know. I think that if a product's going to a company or a receiver, it's up to them to get it off the truck.
I think it's just in my opinion, and there may be people
that's my opinion.
Some may not agree with what I have to say, but I think it's a scam. You've got these major companies that hire a third-party company to unload their trucks. They also get money, so they charge the driver, the company, whatever it is, and then the actual company gets a percentage of that. So instead of hiring guys to unload the trailers, they hire another party and make money from it. So they're not only making money from the product they just ordered from the customer, because a lot of the time those lumper fees are being charged to the company that they just ordered from, because the driver and the company is going to get reimbursed from the shipper, right?
Yeah.
Because of the fee they charge them. And it's like $350 sometimes. I've seen some like $500 American to unload it. Like, are you kidding me? How is the company making any money? Like, that it's a shipper, right?
Yeah, the trucking is big money, big money. Not for the trucker themselves, but for everybody involved. I mean, look at the fines that some of these drivers have to pay because they're unaware of different laws, or your fuel, or you're deaf, or when you go into the shops. I mean, trucking is big money for everybody else but the trucker.
Yeah.
And like I said, how do you make money when you're sitting so much?
You just don't. Yeah. So we don't have a ton of time left here.
Okay.
So what would you suggest to make that a little bit easier on the driver? Like, what could they do in advance to make that situation better?
You had a good idea. Make a phone call. Phone them. Say, okay, I'm 2 hours away, or I'm a day away. How is the load looking? Or should I just take my time? Whatever.
Right.
Communication, I guess, is the key. You've got to learn to communicate, because it's really frustrating. It's frustrating enough when you know what's going on, but when you don't know what's going on and you get there and it's a big surprise.
Yeah.
You know. So.
Especially ask questions. Do you have overnight parking? Do you have bathroom facilities on site with your overnight parking? Find out. Prepare in advance that you're going to be sitting there maybe all night, and you're going to need a place to park. I never show up at a place blind not knowing what's there. I look on Google Earth and I look at it, and you can even zoom right in where you can see where the bathroom facilities are, where there's parking, and you can always tell where there's overnight parking allowed. And you can see the oil stands in the spots where the trucks have been sitting a long time. So that's another indication, right? So call, like you were saying, like we mentioned earlier, call ahead of time. And because this is your time. It really is. Right. And and to make sure there's a place to eat. Yeah. You might be there for 10 hours or 15 hours, so make sure you got food. Yeah. Stock up on the chocolate bars and potato chips, Ray. That'll keep you going. There you go. That'll make your day. Yeah. Well, friends, I really do hope that this has helped somebody out there. If you have any questions regarding this or any other topic, or if you would like to suggest a topic for a future episode, send your comments to truckerglen10@gmail.com. That's truckerglen with the number 10 at gmail.com. Or if you just want to say hi, or you could also leave a comment below in the comments. And I'd like to say a special hi to Jamie out there in Langley. Jamie Davenport. I heard you had coffee with him the other day, and I just said, well, next time we're on the air, I'd like to say hi to him. So there you go. Awesome. All right, thank you, sir. Appreciate that, and it's a pleasure as always. You're not going to say it? I know it is. No, you're supposed to say it sure is. It sure is, Ray. Yes, it is. All right. Blessings, everybody. We'll talk to you next time. Bye for now.